What if I told you this isn't really about oil? It's about food, fertilizers, and the hidden systems that keep the global economy alive. And right now, all of them are at risk. There is a narrow stretch of water, barely 21 miles wide at its tightest point, that holds enormous power over the global economy, the Strait of Hormuz. At first glance, it looks like just another shipping route. Tankers moving quietly across open water, cargo ships following established lanes. But beneath that surface lies one of the most critical pressure points on Earth. Because through this narrow passage flows the energy that powers entire nations. And right now, that flow is under threat. A mid-April 2-week ceasefire between the United States and Iran was extended at the last moment to allow for further negotiations on a peace proposal mediated by Pakistan without setting a specific new end date. However, a war of blockades continues in the Strait of Hormuz, with both sides seizing ships. On April 19th, the U.S. Navy fired on and seized the Iranian-flagged cargo ship Tuska in the Sea of Oman. The U.S. stated the vessel was sanctioned for prior illegal activity, while Iran claimed it was carrying critical medical supplies and denounced the act as piracy. The U.S. military reported disabling the ship for failing to comply with warnings, citing sanctions. Following the Tuska incident, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, attacked several vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, effectively halting most commercial traffic. Reports indicate that 3 cargo ships were seized, allegedly for lacking authorization. During the same period, the U.S. intercepted or turned around several tankers as part of a blockade of Iranian oil, with reports indicating at least 3 Iranian-flagged tankers were stopped. The U.S. military has also been actively blocking Iranian oil vessels, with reports of a dozen ships turned around in its blockade of Iranian ports. Additionally, U.S. forces intercepted at least 3 Iranian-flagged tankers outside the immediate conflict region in Asian waters on Wednesday. These actions are occurring amid a heightened naval standoff, with Iran demanding the lifting of a U.S. blockade and the U.S. asserting control over the Strait of Hormuz despite a declared ceasefire. These are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader pattern, a cycle of action and reaction, tit for tat. And history shows that cycles like this can spiral. What makes this moment different is where it's happening. Because when escalation reaches the Strait of Hormuz, the consequences do not stay regional. They spread outward, across energy markets, across supply chains, and into the daily lives of millions of people around the world. To understand the current situation, we need to look at how quickly events have unfolded. Tensions in the region have been building for some time, but recent actions have pushed the situation into a new phase. The United States increased its naval presence in the region, aiming to secure shipping routes and enforce restrictions on Iranian activity and economy. At the same time, Iran signaled that it would not allow its own economic lifelines to be cut off without response. Then came a series of confrontations at sea. A vessel associated with Iranian operations was intercepted. It was stopped, boarded, and taken under control. From a military perspective, this was a calculated move. But from a strategic perspective, it carried risk. Because in this region, actions rarely go unanswered. And that response came quickly. Iranian forces moved to assert control over commercial vessels passing through the Strait. Ships were diverted and seized. Crews were detained. The message was clear. If pressure is applied, pressure will be returned. This kind of escalation is not new to the region, but the stakes today are higher than they have been in years, because global systems have become more interconnected, more dependent, and more sensitive to disruption. The Strait of Hormuz is often described as a choke point, and for good reason. At its narrowest, shipping lanes are tightly constrained. Tankers move in carefully controlled paths, inbound on one side, outbound on the other. Every day, about 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this corridor. Oil from major producers, including the Arab countries of Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Persian Iran, flows through these waters. This is not just regional trade, it is a global supply. The energy that fuels transportation, industry, and power generation across continents often begins its journey here. That's why even a small disruption can have outsized effects. A delay in shipping, a spike in insurance costs, a temporary rerouting of vessels. All of these factors can tighten supply and drive prices upward. And when those pressures combine, the impact becomes global.
The global crude oil market is facing unprecedented uncertainty. The global crude oil market is facing unprecedented uncertainty.
Oil markets operate on expectations as much as reality. Traders respond not only to what is happening, but to what might happen next. When tensions rise in a critical choke point like the Strait of Hormuz, uncertainty increases. And uncertainty drives in prices. Crude oil benchmarks such as Brent crude and WTI crude begin to climb. That increase does not stay confined to financial markets. It flows downstream. Refineries pay more for crude. Fuel distributors face higher costs. And eventually, those costs reach consumers. Gasoline prices rise. Diesel becomes more expensive. And diesel in particular plays a critical role. It powers trucks that move goods across countries. It fuels ships that carry cargo between continents. It supports heavy machinery in construction, mining, and agriculture. When diesel prices increase, the cost of moving goods increases. And when transportation becomes more expensive, almost everything becomes more expensive. This is how a disruption in one narrow waterway can ripple through the entire global economy. One of the most overlooked impacts of energy disruption is its effect on agriculture. Modern farming is deeply connected to energy markets. Fertilizers, especially nitrogen-based fertilizers, are produced using natural gas as a key input. When natural gas prices rise, fertilizer production becomes more expensive. And when fertilizer becomes more expensive, farmers face difficult choices. They can absorb the cost, reducing their already narrow profit margins. Or they can reduce usage, risking lower crop yields. Neither option is ideal. At the same time, Energy costs affect nearly every stage of farming. Diesel fuels tractors and harvesters. Electricity powers irrigation systems. Transportation networks move crops from fields to markets. When fuel prices rise, each of these steps becomes more costly. Over time, these costs accumulate, and they begin to show up in the price of food. Staple goods such as wheat, corn, and rice become more expensive to produce and distribute. Livestock feed costs increase, affecting meat and dairy prices. Even processed foods become more expensive as manufacturers pass along higher input costs. For consumers, this means higher grocery bills. For farmers, it means increased financial pressure and uncertainty. And for the global food system, it introduces instability. What begins as a maritime conflict can ultimately affect food security. The Strait of Hormuz is not only a route for oil, it is also critical for natural gas exports. Countries such as Qatar ship large volumes of liquefied natural gas through this region. Natural gas plays a central role in modern economies. It is used to generate electricity. It heats homes and buildings. It powers industrial processes. And as we've seen, it is essential for fertilizer production. When supply is disrupted or perceived to be at risk, prices can rise rapidly. This affects energy markets far beyond the Middle East. Regions such as Europe and Asia, which rely heavily on imported energy, are particularly sensitive to these changes. Higher energy costs can slow industrial production, increase electricity prices, and place additional strain on economies already facing inflationary pressures. Shipping companies are highly sensitive to risk. When tensions escalate, insurers raise premiums. Some vessels delay transit, others reroute entirely, adding time and cost. This slows the movement of goods. Supply chains become less efficient, and delays begin to accumulate. Even industries not directly related to energy can feel the effects. Electronics, consumer goods, and raw materials may all experience disruptions. This is how localized instability becomes a global economic issue. The Strait of Hormuz is more than a geographic feature. It is a critical junction in the global system, a place where energy, trade, and geopolitics intersect. When tensions rise here, the effects are not isolated. They ripple outward, affecting markets, industries, and households around the world. From the price of fuel, to the cost of food, to the stability of economies, the impact is far-reaching. And as events continue to unfold, one thing remains clear. What happens in this narrow stretch of water matters to everyone. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't stay there. It moves through energy markets, through farms, through supply chains, and eventually into your daily life. And what you've seen so far is only the beginning. This isn't just a conflict at sea. It's a chain reaction that hasn't fully played out yet. And the most important part of this story hasn't happened yet. Thanks for watching. Please comment, make suggestions for future videos, and subscribe to our channel for more geopolitical and global economy analyses.